A mafia boss was taking his fiancée home until he saw his ex walking in the park with twins. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Now let's jump right back in. The silver Mercedes Maybach glided through Gangnam's upscale streets like a predator stalking prey. Two black SUVs followed at a respectful distance, silent guardians always present, always vigilant. Kang Byul commanded the driver's seat, his powerful build straining against the sharp lines of his black suit. Dark tattoos snaked across his throat and fingers, permanent reminders of a world most people never survived. Next to him lounged Lysandra Corvus, 28, her platinum waves cascading over bare shoulders. The emerald silk dress she wore shimmered with each breath. She represented everything his criminal empire demanded, stunning, deadly, and tied to the Russian networks his operation craved. At 35, Byul had conquered Seoul's underworld through ice-cold precision. His engagement to Lysandra was barely 6 weeks fresh, recent enough to seal the partnership, young enough that neither bothered pretending this was romance. No feelings, no vulnerability, no mess. Pure business disguised as matrimony. Our combined territories will be unstoppable after we marry, Lysandra remarked, reapplying crimson lipstick without sparing him a glance. Father believes your nightclubs and our supply chains will create an unbreakable monopoly. Byul offered no response. His penetrating stare remained fixed forward, his expression carved from granite. He had mastered the language of silence years ago. The vehicle decelerated near the park crossing. Evening runners and strolling families crowded the pathways, ordinary souls living unremarkable existences. Not one suspected that the man observing from behind darkened glass had condemned men before his morning coffee. Byul surveyed them mechanically, constantly evaluating, perpetually alert, when reality suddenly shattered around him. A woman moved along the park walkway. She pushed forward with stubborn resolve despite visible fatigue, two infants secured against her torso in a threadbare baby carrier. Her tattered brown coat offered little protection from the biting October air, her faded cargo pants marked with dirt and struggle. Even at this distance, even with her face angled downward, even after 18 months of commanding himself to erase her memory, Byul knew her instantly. The line of her profile, the defiant tilt of her head despite crushing circumstances, the unbreakable spirit that suffering couldn't destroy. Zuria Jones, the woman he had abandoned to shield from his violent world. The infants appeared roughly 6 months old, wrapped snugly in tiny knitted hats. He glimpsed their small faces, their wide eyes curious and aware. The timeline slammed into him like a sledgehammer. 18 months since he'd vanished from her life, 9 months of pregnancy, 6 months of existence. The calculation was flawless. The reality was inescapable. Byul's hands that had squeezed triggers without wavering, that had authorized executions without blinking, now crushed the leather steering wheel until veins bulged across his knuckles. Those babies carried his gaze. The Mercedes lurched forward, then jerked to an abrupt stop. Byul's foot had slipped off the accelerator completely. The car behind them honked, sharp and impatient. The traffic light ahead glowed green, but Byul couldn't process the color. His entire world had narrowed to the woman struggling through the park with 2 children strapped to her chest. Zuria shifted one baby higher, adjusting the carrier with practiced movements that spoke of countless sleepless nights. The faint purple shadow along her cheekbone caught the fading sunlight. Someone had hit her. The thought ignited something primal in Byul's chest, something he'd buried the day he walked away. Byul. Lysandra's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts, sharp as a blade. The light is green. He didn't move, couldn't move. His eyes tracked Zuria as she navigated around a group of teenagers, her movements careful and protective. One of the babies turned its head, and for a split second, Byul saw the child's face clearly, the shape of the eyes, the set of the jaw. It was like staring into a mirror that reflected back 18 months of consequences. Another horn blared, longer this time. The SUV behind them flashed its headlights twice. His security detail was getting restless. Biol! Lysandra's tone sharpened, losing its earlier boredom. She followed his line of sight, her calculating gaze sweeping across the park. What are you looking at? He forced his foot back onto the accelerator. The Mercedes rolled forward, crossing the intersection at a crawl. Biol's head turned involuntarily, tracking Zuria until she disappeared behind a cluster of trees. His pulse hammered in his throat, a sensation so foreign he barely recognized it. Lysandra twisted in her seat, studying him with the focus of a predator sensing weakness. You look like you've seen a ghost. The observation landed too close to truth. Biol had believed Zuria was gone, safely removed from his dangerous existence. He'd convinced himself that disappearing without explanation had been mercy, not cruelty. That she would move on, find someone safe, live the quiet life she deserved. He had been catastrophically wrong. It's nothing, Biol said, his voice rougher than intended. He cleared his throat, straightening his posture. Just thought I recognized someone. Someone? Lysandra's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. That woman with the babies, she looked homeless. The word struck like a physical blow. Homeless. Zuria, who used to laugh at his terrible jokes and fall asleep reading philosophy books. Zuria, who'd had dreams bigger than his empire. Zuria, who'd made him believe for 3 months that he could be something other than a monster. Now she was struggling to survive, raising twins alone, wearing clothes that had seen better years. Because of him. Because he'd decided her fate without asking. Because he'd believed his absence would protect her. I was mistaken, Biol lied, accelerating through the next intersection. Just someone who looked familiar. Lysandra watched him for 3 long seconds, her ice-blue eyes missing nothing. She'd been raised in the same brutal world he commanded. She understood power, recognized deception, and never forgot perceived slights. Interesting, she murmured, turning back to face forward. Her fingers drummed against her clutch purse, a rhythmic pattern that Biol had learned meant her mind was working through possibilities. You've never lost focus like that before. It won't happen again. No, Lysandra agreed, her smile razor thin. I'm certain it won't. But her tone suggested she didn't believe him. And worse, Biol knew she was right to doubt. Because even as he drove toward the restaurant, even as he felt Lysandra's suspicion radiating like heat, his mind remained locked on that park, on Zuria's exhausted face, on the bruise marking her cheek, on 2 babies who shared his blood, growing up without knowing their father's name. The Mercedes turned onto the main boulevard, putting distance between Biol and the park. But distance meant nothing, not anymore. The ghosts he'd tried to bury had just walked back into his life, and they were wearing his children's faces. Dinner at the French restaurant passed in a blur of forced conversation and untouched plates. Lysandra spoke about wedding venues and guest lists, while Biol's mind replayed that moment in an endless loop. Zuria's exhausted face, the bruise on her cheek, 2 babies bundled against the October cold. He nodded at appropriate intervals, murmured agreement when necessary, and excused himself the moment dessert arrived. Business emergency, he said, already standing. My driver will take you home. Lysandra's eyes narrowed, but she didn't protest. She understood his world well enough to know that questioning him in public was a mistake she wouldn't make twice. The ride back to his penthouse felt suffocating. Biol loosened his tie, his throat tight with questions he couldn't answer. Had Zuria tried to contact him? Had his security turned her away? The possibility gnawed at him, with teeth sharp enough to draw blood. The moment his penthouse door closed behind him at 9:45 p.m., Biol pulled out his phone and dialed the only number he trusted completely. Boss? Kaylin Vex answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. Kaylin had been Biol's right hand for 12 years, a shadow who cleaned up problems before they became disasters. I need information on someone, Biol said, walking to the wall of windows overlooking the glittering Seoul skyline. Complete background. where she lives, how she lives, everything from the past 18 months. Name? Zuria Jones. The name felt strange on his tongue after so long. African-American woman, late 20s, last known address was an apartment in Itaewon. A pause. Kaylin knew exactly who Zuria was. He'd been the one who'd made certain she could never reach Byul after the breakup, following orders without question. Should I ask why? No. Understood. How fast do you need this? Tonight. Another pause. Longer this time. Boss, it's almost 10 p.m. That kind of deep dive takes time. Then start now. Byul's voice dropped to the tone that ended arguments. And Kaylin? I want medical records, financial statements, security footage from her building. I want to know who she talks to, who she lives with, and who put that bruise on her face. The line went silent for 3 heartbeats. She's hurt? Find out. I'll have something for you by dawn. Byul ended the call and stood at the window, watching the city breathe beneath him. Somewhere out there, Zuria was putting 2 babies to bed. Babies who might be his. Babies who definitely had his eyes. Sleep proved impossible. Byul paced his penthouse like a caged animal, drinking whiskey that tasted like ash, and checking his phone every 10 minutes. Dawn broke over Seoul at 6:23 a.m., painting the sky in shades of gray and gold. His phone buzzed at 6:45 a.m. I'm outside, Kaylin said. Byul opened the door to find his second-in-command holding a thick manila folder. Kaylin looked exhausted, his normally sharp appearance wrinkled from an all-nighter. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but his expression remained carefully neutral. You're not going to like this, Kaylin warned, stepping inside. Show me. Kaylin placed the folder on the glass coffee table and flipped it open. The first page was a photograph, clearly taken from street surveillance. Zuria walking through the park, exactly as Byul had seen her yesterday. The babies strapped to her chest were visible, their small faces peaceful in sleep. Twins, Kaylin confirmed. Born March 17th of this year. A boy and a girl. Verdia Kailani Jones and Amir Ezra Jones. The names hit Byul like bullets. Real names, real children. Real proof that his 3-month relationship with Zuria had created permanent consequences. Father listed on the birth certificate? Byul asked, his voice rough. Unknown, she left it blank. Because she'd tried to tell him, because his men had turned her away. The realization settled in his stomach like poison. Kaylin flipped to the next page, a medical record from Seoul National Hospital. She gave birth alone, no family present, no partner listed. The delivery was complicated. She hemorrhaged and required an emergency transfusion. The twins were born premature at 34 weeks and spent 3 weeks in the NICU. Byul's hands clenched into fists. While he'd been building his empire, Zuria had been fighting for her life and the lives of their children, alone. She tried to contact you, Kaylin continued quietly, pulling out printed text messages. 17 times in the first trimester. Every message was intercepted per your original orders. She stopped trying after month 4. Byul stared at the messages, reading Zuria's increasingly desperate attempts to reach him. The last one, dated 7 months ago, simply said, I understand. I won't bother you again. Keep going, Byul ordered, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Kaylin flipped through pages of financial records, bank statements showing Zuria's account draining steadily, hospital bills piling up, rent notices turning into eviction warnings. She was evicted from her Itaewon apartment 4 months ago for non-payment. The medical debt from the birth exceeded 130 million won. She's been bouncing between shelters and cheap motels ever since. And the bruise? Kaylin's expression darkened. He pulled out a grainy photo of a man in his 50s, thick-necked and cruel-eyed. Lee Sang-ho, small-time loan shark operating in the Dongdaemun district. Zuria borrowed money from him 3 months ago to cover formula and diapers. When she couldn't pay, he made an example of her. Rage, white-hot and consuming, exploded through Byul's chest. Someone had put their hands on Zuria, on the mother of his children, the woman he'd claimed to protect by walking away. Current address? Byul asked, his voice deadly calm. She's staying in a boarding house in Guro district, room 212. The place is barely livable. No heat, communal bathroom, bedbugs. She shares a room with the twins. Rent is 200,000 won per week, which she's currently 3 weeks behind on. Biol studied the final page in the folder. A candid shot of Zuria sitting on a worn mattress, both babies cradled in her arms. Her eyes were closed, her expression peaceful despite the poverty surrounding her. She looked devastated by exhaustion, but somehow still beautiful, still strong, still everything he'd walked away from. "They're mine," Biol said. It wasn't a question. "The timing fits perfectly," Kaylin confirmed. "And boss, respectfully, those kids have your eyes. Anyone who sees them will know." That was the problem. And the solution. And the reason Biol's carefully constructed life was about to implode spectacularly. "I need you to do something for me," Biol said, closing the folder. "Anything." "Find Lee Sang-ho." Kaylin's expression shifted, understanding flickering in his eyes. "And then?" "Make sure he understands what happens to men who touch what belongs to me." Kaylin nodded once and disappeared through the door, leaving Biol alone with the folder and the weight of 18 months of mistakes. But dealing with Lee Sang-ho was just the surface wound. The real damage required a different kind of confrontation, one that couldn't be delegated or avoided any longer. Biol changed into dark jeans and a black leather jacket, abandoning the suits that announced his status. He needed to move through Guro district without attracting attention, without the entourage that usually followed him like a second shadow. This conversation required privacy and something approaching honesty, neither of which came naturally to him. The drive to Guro district took 40 minutes through morning traffic. Biol parked 3 blocks away from the address Kaylin had provided, choosing to walk the final distance. The neighborhood deteriorated with each step. Crumbling concrete buildings leaned against each other like exhausted soldiers. Trash collected in corners where the wind couldn't reach it. The smell of cooking oil and mildew hung thick in the October air. The boarding house sat wedged between a convenience store and a karaoke bar that had seen better decades. Paint peeled from the walls in long strips, revealing layers of previous colors beneath. The front door hung crooked on its hinges, propped open with a concrete block. Biol climbed the narrow stairwell to the second floor, each step creaking under his weight. The hallway stretched before him, dim and claustrophobic. Water stains bloomed across the ceiling like dark flowers. Room 212 sat at the far end, its door marked with faded numbers that barely clung to the wood. He stood outside for 3 full minutes, listening. A baby's cry filtered through the thin walls, then stopped abruptly. Zuria's voice followed, soft and soothing, singing something he couldn't quite make out. The sound of her voice after 18 months of silence hit harder than he'd expected. Biol knocked 3 times, firm but not aggressive. The singing stopped. Footsteps approached, light and cautious. The door opened 6 inches, held in place by a flimsy chain lock that wouldn't stop a determined child, let alone an actual threat. Zuria's face appeared in the gap. For one frozen moment, they simply stared at each other. Her eyes, which had once looked at him with warmth and trust, now reflected nothing but shock, and something closer to horror. "No," she whispered, already trying to close the door. Biol caught it with his palm, not forcing it open, but preventing it from shutting completely. "Zuria, please." "Get away from here!" Her voice shook with fury barely contained. "You don't get to show up now. I need to talk to you. I needed to talk to you 18 months ago." She pushed against the door, but Biol held firm. "I needed you 9 months ago when I was hemorrhaging on a hospital table. I needed you 6 months ago when your children were fighting to breathe in incubators. You weren't there for any of it, so you don't get to need anything from me now." The words landed like physical blows, each one deserved. Behind Zuria, one of the babies started crying again, a thin wail that spoke of hunger or discomfort or both. "I didn't know," Biol said, hating how inadequate the explanation sounded. "I swear to you, I didn't know about the pregnancy." "Because your people made sure of that." Zuria's eyes blazed with 18 months of accumulated rage. I called 17 times, Biol. 17. I showed up at your club 4 times before your security physically removed me. The last guy told me if I came back I'd regret it. So I stopped trying. The baby's cries intensified, joined by a second voice. Zuria glanced over her shoulder, her expression torn between fury at him and concern for her children. Their children. Let me in, Biol said quietly. Please, 5 minutes. So you can what? Apologize? Throw money at the problem and disappear again? Zuria laughed, but the sound held no humor. I don't want your money, and I definitely don't want your apologies. Then what do you want? The question hung in the stale hallway air between them. Zuria's hands trembled where they gripped the door. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a sickly yellow-green, but Biol could still see the outline of fingers against her skin. I wanted you to be there when I woke up from surgery not knowing if my babies were alive, Zuria said, her voice cracking. I wanted you next to me when Verdia stopped breathing and the doctors had to resuscitate her. I wanted you holding Amir when he finally gained enough weight to leave the hospital. I wanted you at 3 in the morning when I was trying to nurse 2 premature infants with infected surgical stitches and no idea how I'd pay for their next month of formula. Each sentence drove the knife deeper. Biol had faced armed men without flinching, had stared down death more times than he could count. But Zuria's words stripped him bare with surgical precision. I can't change the past, he said, but I can fix the present. You can't fix this, Zuria's laugh turned bitter. You think showing up makes you a father? You think one conversation erases 18 months of absence? Behind her, the crying reached a fever pitch. Zuria closed her eyes, exhaustion winning over anger for just a moment. When she opened them again, something had shifted in her expression. Not forgiveness, but a weary kind of resignation. You have 5 minutes, she said, unlatching the chain. But if you upset them, I will throw you out myself, and I don't care how many men you have or how dangerous you think you are. She stepped back, pulling the door open fully. Biol entered the room and felt his heart crack straight down the middle. The space couldn't have been more than 12 square meters. A single mattress lay on the floor in one corner, covered with a thin blanket. 2 laundry baskets sat side by side near the window, each lined with towels and serving as makeshift cribs. The babies thrashed inside them, their small faces red from crying. A hot plate balanced precariously on an overturned crate. 3 bottles sat in a basin of water. Diapers hung drying from a rope strung across the room. This was where his children lived. This was what his protection had accomplished. Zuria moved past him without a word, kneeling between the laundry baskets. She lifted the baby on the left, cradling the infant against her chest with practiced ease. The crying softened to hiccuping whimpers. This is Verdia, she said flatly, not looking at him. She's the fighter. Born first, stopped breathing twice in the NICU, but she's stubborn as hell. Biol stepped closer, his throat tight. Verdia's tiny face was scrunched with residual distress, her brown skin still flushed from crying. But her eyes, when they opened, were unmistakably his, dark, intense, already suspicious of the world around her. Zuria shifted, picking up the second baby without putting Verdia down. She was strong from months of necessity, her arms steady despite the double weight. And this is Amir. He was smaller, quieter. The doctor said he might not make it through the first week. Amir's eyes were already open, studying Biol with unsettling focus for a 6-month-old. Same eyes, same expression. It was like looking at photographs of himself as an infant, if such photographs had ever existed. They look like you, Zuria said, her voice hollow. Everyone who sees them knows they're not fully mine. Korean features mixed with mine. Your eyes in their faces. I can't even pretend you don't exist when strangers on the street ask about their father. I'm sorry, Biol said, the words painfully insufficient. Sorry doesn't pay hospital bills. Sorry doesn't keep a roof over their heads. Sorry doesn't explain where their father was when they needed him. Zuria finally met his gaze, her expression carved from stone. Your 5 minutes are up. Leave. I'm ending my engagement, Biol said. The words came out before he'd fully processed the decision. But once spoken, they felt absolutely right. Tonight. I'm ending it tonight. Zuria stared at him like he'd started speaking another language. What are you talking about? The woman in the car yesterday, Lysandra. We're engaged. Biol forced himself to hold Zuria's gaze. It's a business arrangement. An alliance between my operation and her family's network. But I'm ending it. Why? Suspicion sharpened Zuria's features. So you can play house with us? So you can ease your guilt? Because I have children who deserve better than this. Biol gestured at the room, at the poverty that surrounded them. And because the woman who gave them life deserves better than being beaten by loan sharks, while I plan a wedding to someone I don't love. You don't love me either, Zuria said quietly. You left, remember? You walked away without explanation, blocked my calls, had your men threaten me. That's not love, Biol. That's convenience. The accusation hit its target, but Biol didn't flinch. You're right. I left to protect you from my world. I thought distance would keep you safe. I was wrong about everything. Verdia started fussing again. Zuria bounced gently, her attention split between the babies and the man who'd destroyed her life. Breaking your engagement won't fix this. No, Biol agreed, but it's a start. He left before she could argue further, before his resolve could waver. The ride back to his penthouse felt surreal, like moving through water. His phone buzzed twice with messages from Lysandra asking about dinner plans. He ignored them both. The confrontation couldn't wait for the perfect moment. There would never be a perfect moment for detonating his life. Biol called Lysandra at 2:30 p.m., his voice carefully neutral. We need to talk. Tonight, 8 o'clock at my penthouse. That sounds ominous, Lysandra said lightly, but he could hear the calculation beneath her tone. Should I be worried? Just be here. She arrived at 7:58 p.m., punctual as always. Lysandra swept into his penthouse wearing winter white, her platinum hair perfectly styled. She looked like ice given human form, beautiful and lethal. You've been avoiding me, she said, setting her purse on the marble counter. The restaurant yesterday, the ignored messages today. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were losing interest in our arrangement. I am, Biol said bluntly. The engagement is over. Lysandra went absolutely still. The casual elegance drained from her posture, replaced by something far more dangerous. Excuse me? I can't marry you. Biol kept his voice level, professional. The alliance won't work. I'm ending the engagement effective immediately. You're ending it. Lysandra's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood. Do you understand what you're saying? Do you comprehend what this means? I understand perfectly. No, I don't think you do. Lysandra stalked closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots. My father moved $300 million in product to cement this partnership. The Corvus family publicly announced our union. We sent invitations to every major player from Seoul to Moscow. And you think you can just end it? I have children, Biol said. 2 of them, 6 months old. Their mother is living in poverty because I abandoned her. I can't marry you while they exist. Lysandra's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on cold fury. The woman from the park? The one with the babies? That's what this is about? Her name is Zuria. I don't care what her name is. Lysandra's voice dropped to something venomous. You're throwing away our alliance, embarrassing my family, and destroying carefully laid plans because some woman trapped you with pregnancy. She didn't trap anyone. I got her pregnant and disappeared. That's on me. How noble. Lysandra's smile could have cut glass. You think playing devoted father will erase 18 months of neglect? You think she'll forgive you just because you're rich and powerful? This isn't about forgiveness. Then what is it about? Responsibility. Biel met her ice blue eyes without wavering. Something I should have accepted 9 months ago. Lysandra stared at him for a long moment, her mind clearly working through angles and responses. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. My father will destroy you for this. The Corvus family doesn't accept public humiliation. We especially don't accept it from Korean gangsters who forget their place. Then let him try. Oh, he will. Lysandra collected her purse with deliberate grace. And when he's done, you'll wish you'd never seen that woman in the park. You'll wish you'd chosen power over sentiment. You'll wish you'd remembered that in our world, love is just another word for weakness. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Enjoy your broken little family while it lasts, Byul, because I promise you, it won't last long. The door closed behind her with quiet finality. Byul stood alone in his penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below. He'd just declared war on one of the most dangerous families in the international underworld, for 2 babies and a woman who hated him. Somehow, maybe, it felt like the first honest choice he'd made in years. Byul didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat at his desk making calls, moving pieces across a chessboard only he could see. By 3:15 a.m., Zuria's medical debt had been erased from every hospital database in Seoul. By 4:30 a.m., her loan with Lee Sang-ho had been paid in full, with substantial interest that ensured the man would never approach her again. By 5:45 a.m., 6 months of back rent on the boarding house had been settled, plus an additional year paid in advance. But Byul wasn't finished. At 6:30 a.m., he called in another favor. I need a security team, he told Daxon Vale, his head of personnel. 2 rotating shifts, 4 people each. Discreet surveillance on a woman and 2 infants in Guro District. Protection detail or intelligence gathering? Daxon asked. Protection. Highest priority. If anyone approaches them with hostile intent, neutralize the threat immediately. Understood. They'll be in position by noon. Byul ended the call and stared at the file Kaylin had compiled. Zuria's face looked back at him from a dozen surveillance photos, each one capturing a different moment of struggle. Carrying groceries up 4 flights of stairs, washing baby clothes in a communal sink, walking through the rain without an umbrella because she couldn't carry one while managing 2 infants. He'd done this to her. His protection had become her prison. The morning stretched into afternoon. Byul waited for the inevitable explosion. Because Zuria wasn't the type to accept charity silently. She would notice, she would investigate, and she would come for him with all the fury he deserved. The call came at 2:17 p.m. What did you do? Zuria's voice vibrated with barely controlled rage. What the hell did you do, Byul? I helped, he said simply. You paid my debts, all of them. The hospital, the loan shark, the rent. I woke up this morning to messages saying everything was settled. Her breathing came fast and harsh through the phone. And there are men following me, 4 of them, rotating in pairs. Don't tell me you didn't send them. They're there to keep you safe. I didn't ask for your safety. The words exploded from her. I didn't ask for anything from you. I know. Then why? Zuria's voice cracked. Why now? Where was this concern 18 months ago? Byul closed his eyes. I can't change the past. I can only try to fix what I broke. You think money fixes this? You think paying bills and hiring bodyguards makes you a father? She laughed, sharp and bitter. You still don't understand anything. Then help me understand. Silence stretched between them, loaded with 18 months of pain. When Zuria spoke again, her voice had dropped to something more dangerous than anger. Where are you right now? My office, Gangnam Tower, 42nd floor. Stay there. I'm coming to you. The line went dead. Byul told his assistant to cancel the rest of his appointments. 43 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Zuria stepped into his private office. She'd left the twins with someone, which meant this conversation was going to be worse than he'd anticipated. She looked around the space with visible contempt. Sleek furniture, expensive art, windows overlooking the entire city. Everything screamed wealth and power. Everything represented the world she'd been excluded from. Nice office, Zuria said coldly. This is where you were while I was getting evicted, while I was choosing between baby formula and my own meals. Zuria, no, you don't get to speak yet. She stalked closer, her anger filling the space between them. You paid 130 million won in medical bills like it was pocket change. You settled my debt with that animal who hit me. You hired professional security to follow me around like I'm some kind of celebrity. All of this in less than 24 hours. I have resources. I used them. That's exactly the problem. Zuria stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Bjol could see the exhaustion carved into her features. You have unlimited resources, unlimited power, unlimited reach, and you chose not to use any of it when it actually mattered. The accusation landed like a blade between his ribs. I was pregnant and terrified, Zuria continued, her voice shaking. I worked 2 jobs until I physically couldn't stand anymore. I ate 1 meal a day so I could afford prenatal vitamins. I delivered our children in a hospital I couldn't afford while nurses whispered about the single mother with no family and no support. Where were your resources then, Bjol? I didn't know. Because you didn't want to know. Her composure finally shattered. You made sure I couldn't reach you. You built walls so high that even carrying your children couldn't breach them. And now you show up with money and bodyguards thinking that erases everything? Biel forced himself to meet her eyes. I can't erase it. I know that. But I can make sure it never happens again. You're missing the point. Zuria's laugh held no humor. This isn't about money. This has never been about money. You could give me $1 billion tomorrow and it wouldn't change what you did. Then what do you want from me? I want you to understand that you can't buy your way into a life you abandoned. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something fierce and final. You want to be a father? You want to be part of their lives? Then show up. Not with cash and hired muscle, but with yourself. Be there at 3 a.m. when they won't stop crying. Be there when Verdia has another respiratory episode. Be there when Amir refuses to eat and I'm terrified he'll end up back in the hospital. I will, Bjol said. I swear to you, I will. Words are easy. You're good at words. Zuria turned toward the elevator. But I've heard your promises before, and they all ended with me alone. The elevator doors closed on Zuria's departing figure, leaving Bjol standing in his office with the taste of failure sharp on his tongue. He'd expected her anger. He'd prepared for her accusations. What he hadn't anticipated was how completely right she would be about everything. 40 floors below, Zuria climbed into a taxi and disappeared into Seoul's afternoon traffic, unaware that someone else had been watching the entire exchange. Across the street, in a nondescript sedan with tinted windows, Chairman Min Tae-jun lowered his binoculars and smiled. At 63, Min had survived 4 decades in Korea's criminal underworld by being patient, observant, and absolutely ruthless when opportunity presented itself. He'd been Bjol's enemy for 12 years, ever since the younger man had seized territory that Min considered rightfully his. Follow that taxi, Min instructed his driver. Don't lose her. The sedan pulled into traffic 3 cars behind Zuria's taxi. Min settled back into the leather seat, his mind already calculating possibilities. He'd come to Gangnam Tower today, hoping to observe Bjol's business patterns, looking for weaknesses in his security protocols. What he'd witnessed instead was far more valuable than any tactical intelligence. Kang Bjol, the untouchable ghost of Seoul's underworld, had a weakness. And she'd just left his building looking furious. The taxi wound through the city for 37 minutes before stopping in Guro District. Min watched Zuria pay the driver and climb out, her movements showing exhaustion that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. She entered a decrepit boarding house, the kind of place that rented rooms by the week to people with nowhere else to go. Interesting, Min murmured. His driver, a thick-necked enforcer named June, glanced in the rearview mirror. Boss? Kang Bjol just paid off massive debts for a woman living in a slum. He hired an 8-man security rotation to protect her, and judging by the conversation I observed through those office windows, she's the mother of his children. Min's smile widened. Our friend has finally developed a heart. How unfortunate for him. You think she's leverage? I think she's everything. Min pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts until he found the right name. Get me surveillance on this building. I want eyes on every entrance, every window, and find out everything about the woman. Name, background, daily routine, who she talks to, where she goes." "What about Buell's security team?" June asked. "He'll have people watching her. Then we'll need to remove them first." The surveillance took 3 days to establish. Min's people worked carefully, positioning cameras in abandoned apartments and on rooftops with clear sightlines to the boarding house. They documented Zuria's patterns with methodical precision. Morning walks through the park with 2 infants strapped to her chest. Afternoon trips to the convenience store for supplies. Evening returns to her room, always before dark. And always, Buell's security team shadowed her movements. The detail rotated every 12 hours. 4 operatives during the day, 4 at night. Professional soldiers who maintained tactical spacing and constant communication. They were good, Min admitted grudgingly. Buell had spent serious money on this protection, which meant the woman was worth serious effort to acquire. On the 4th day of surveillance, Min's intelligence officer delivered a comprehensive file. Her name is Zuria Jones, 29 years old, American citizen, teaching English in Seoul when she met Buell. Relationship lasted 3 months before he cut contact. She gave birth to twins 6 months ago, Verdia and Amir. Hospital records confirmed traumatic delivery with complications. Min studied the photographs included in the file. Zuria looked different in these older images, taken before pregnancy and poverty had marked her. She'd been beautiful then, radiant with the kind of optimism that Seoul's underworld usually destroyed quickly. "And the children?" Min asked. "DNA testing would require samples we don't have, but visual analysis suggests paternity is likely. The boy especially has Buell's features. Same eyes, same bone structure." "Perfect." Min closed the file. "Now tell me about the security team." "Ex-military, all of them. 3 former special forces, 1 former intelligence operative. They maintain radio contact, check in every 15 minutes, and never let Zuria out of visual range. Taking them down without alerting their command structure will be complicated." "Complicated isn't impossible." Min leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What's their shift change protocol?" "Noon and midnight. The outgoing team waits until the incoming team confirms position before departing. There's approximately a 90-second window where both teams are present." "And their vehicles?" 2 sedans, black Hyundai for the day shift, dark gray Genesis for night rotation, both parked within 50 meters of the boarding house. Min considered the logistics. Eliminating 8 trained operatives without causing immediate alarm required precision and speed. Fortunately, he had both at his disposal. "Here's what we're going to do," Min said, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who'd orchestrated dozens of similar operations. "Tomorrow at midnight during shift change, we take both teams simultaneously. No survivors, no warnings, no chances for radio contact. We have a 3-minute window before someone at Buell's headquarters notices the missed check-in." "And the woman?" his intelligence officer asked. "Once the security is eliminated, we monitor her for 24 hours. Let her believe she's still protected. Let Buell believe his people are still operational. Then, when everyone is complacent, we take her and the children." "Where do we bring them?" "The warehouse at Incheon Docks, Pier 73. Min's eyes glinted with anticipation. "It's isolated, defensible, and far enough from Buell's usual territory that he'll have to come alone if he wants them back alive." The pieces were falling into place with beautiful simplicity. Buell had spent 18 months being the ghost, the untouchable predator who operated from shadows and struck without warning. But ghosts couldn't protect what they loved. Ghosts couldn't negotiate when their children's lives hung in the balance. Min had spent 12 years waiting for this opportunity, waiting for Buell to care about something more than power, waiting for the perfect pressure point to exploit. Now he had 3. "Boss," June said carefully, "Buell isn't going to let this go. He'll come for her, for them. I'm counting on it." Min gazed out at the boarding house where Zuria and the twins slept, unaware of the trap closing around them. "In fact, I'm demanding it. I'll send him video proof of what I have. I'll tell him exactly where to find us. And I'll make sure he understands that he comes alone, unarmed, and completely at my mercy." Why give him a chance at all? Why not just kill them? Because death is too quick. Min's smile turned predatory. I want Kang Byul to feel helpless. I want him to understand what it means to lose everything while having the power to change nothing. I want him broken before I kill him. The sedan pulled away from the curb, leaving the boarding house behind. Inside that crumbling building, Zuria sang lullabies to twins who had their father's eyes, completely unaware that she'd just become the centerpiece of a war 12 years in the making. The kidnapping happened at 11:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Byul sat in a conference room 42 floors above Seoul, surrounded by men in expensive suits discussing quarterly profits and territorial expansion. His phone buzzed on the polished table, displaying a message from Daxon Vale. The first line made his blood stop moving. Security team missed their noon check-in. All 8 operatives unresponsive. Byul stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. The room went silent, 14 faces turning toward him with varying expressions of confusion and alarm. Meeting's over, Byul said, already moving toward the door. Everyone out. He didn't wait for compliance, didn't care about the unfinished business littering the table. His fingers flew across his phone screen, calling Daxon's direct line. Talk to me, Byul demanded the moment the call connected. Both teams went dark at the same time. Last confirmed position was Guro District, standard rotation outside the boarding house. I've sent a recovery team to investigate. Daxon's voice carried professional calm, but Byul heard the underlying tension. They should arrive in 12 minutes. Send everyone. I want every available operative converging on that location right now. Already done, boss. But Byul, if both teams went silent simultaneously, this was coordinated, professional. Someone knew exactly when and how to strike. The implication hung between them like poison gas. Someone had been watching. Someone had studied the patterns, identified the vulnerabilities, and executed a surgical strike against 8 trained soldiers. Someone wanted Zuria and the twins. Byul's elevator descended through 42 floors in what felt like hours. His mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. The Corvus family seeking revenge for the broken engagement. Rival organizations testing his defenses. Random criminals who'd noticed the security detail and decided to investigate. Or Chairman Min, his oldest enemy, finally finding the perfect weapon. The Mercedes was waiting when Byul hit the ground floor. He climbed in, barking the address to his driver. Traffic crawled through Gangnam's midday congestion with infuriating slowness. Every red light felt like torture. Every slow-moving vehicle became an obstacle he wanted to eliminate with extreme prejudice. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Video file. Byul's hands shook as he opened the attachment. The video quality was deliberately poor, grainy and dark, but the subject matter was crystal clear. 2 laundry baskets sat side by side on a concrete floor. Inside them, Verdia and Amir squirmed and cried, their small faces red with distress. The baskets had been placed inside something larger, something with metal bars that cast shadows across the babies' bodies. A cage. His children were crying in a cage. The camera panned left, revealing Zuria bound to a metal chair. Duct tape covered her mouth. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow. Her eyes, wide with terror, stared directly at the camera. At him. A voice spoke from off-screen, distorted by electronic modulation. Hello, Kang Byul. I believe I have something that belongs to you. The video ended. A text message appeared beneath it. Pier 73, Incheon Docks. Come alone. Come unarmed. Come before sunset, or I start removing fingers from the mother. 1 for every 15 minutes you're late. The children watch, of course. I want them to understand what happens when their father values pride over family. The message included coordinates and a final line. I'll know if you bring backup. I'll know if you're carrying weapons. Break either rule, and you'll find pieces of them floating in the harbor. Byul stared at the screen until the words blurred. Rage and terror warred inside his chest, each emotion fighting for dominance. Someone had his children. Someone had Zuria. Someone was threatening to dismember her while Verdia and Amir watched from a cage. His phone rang. Kaylin's number. I got the same video? Kaylin said without preamble. Boss, this is Chairman Min, has to be. The pier location. The theatrical cruelty, it's his signature. I know. Then you also know this is a trap. He wants you alone and defenseless. He's going to kill you the moment you arrive. Probably. Biol, listen to me. We can assemble a strike team in 2 hours. Hit the pier from 3 directions, overwhelm whatever force he's brought. We can save them without you walking into an execution. And if he sees you coming? If he has spotters watching the docks? Biol's voice came out flat, emotionless. He'll start cutting before your team gets within 100 meters. You know he will. Silence stretched across the line. Kaylin understood the mathematics of the situation as well as Biol did. Min hadn't made empty threats in 40 years. If he promised to torture Zuria while the twins watched, he would follow through with methodical precision. There has to be another way, Kaylin said. There isn't. Not one that guarantees they survive. Biol watched Sol blur past the window, the city he'd conquered through violence and calculation. None of that power mattered now. Get me the layout of Pier 73. Every entrance, every sightline, every possible escape route. Send it to my phone in the next 10 minutes. What are you planning? Exactly what Min wants. I'm going alone. I'm going unarmed. And I'm going to save them or die trying. He'll kill you, boss. You know that, right? The moment he's done playing with you, he'll put a bullet in your head. Then I'll make sure he waits until after they're safe. Biol ended the call before Kaylin could argue further. The Mercedes turned onto the expressway heading west toward Incheon. Sunset was at 6:18 p.m. According to the weather app on Biol's phone. That gave him 6 hours and 31 minutes to plan an approach that kept Zuria and the twins alive. 6 hours and 31 minutes to say goodbye to the empire he'd built. Because Kaylin was right about one thing. This was an execution dressed up as a rescue. Chairman Min had spent 12 years waiting for this opportunity. He wouldn't waste it on anything less than Biol's complete destruction. But before Min pulled that trigger, Biol would make absolutely certain his children were safe. He would guarantee Zuria walked away from this alive. He would burn every bridge and break every rule if it meant Verdia and Amir grew up knowing their father had chosen them over everything else, even if that choice meant they'd grow up without him. The drive to Incheon took 53 minutes through heavy traffic. Biol used every second to study the pier layout Kaylin had sent. Pier 73 was an abandoned shipping terminal, scheduled for demolition but caught in bureaucratic limbo for the past 3 years. Rusted containers stacked like forgotten monuments. Crumbling warehouses with holes in their roofs. Perfect territory for an ambush. The sun hung low in the western sky when Biol's Mercedes pulled into the industrial zone surrounding the docks. He'd ordered his driver to stop half a kilometer away, choosing to walk the final distance alone. The air smelled of salt water and decay, carried on a cold wind that cut through his jacket. Biol checked his phone one last time. 5:47 p.m., 31 minutes until sunset. He powered down the device completely, removing the battery to ensure no tracking remained active. Min would have equipment to detect electronic signals. Biol couldn't afford to give him any reason to escalate. The warehouse at Pier 73 loomed against the darkening sky. Its corrugated metal walls streaked with rust and graffiti. The main door stood open, a rectangle of deeper shadow beckoning him forward. Every instinct Biol had developed over 17 years in the underworld screamed warnings. This was suicide. This was foolishness. This was the end of everything he'd built. He walked through the door anyway. The warehouse interior stretched vast and empty, punctuated by support columns casting long shadows. Overhead lights flickered intermittently, creating a strobe effect that made depth perception nearly impossible. At the far end, perhaps 60 meters away, Chairman Min stood beside a metal cage. Inside that cage, Verdia and Amir cried with the desperate persistence of infants who'd been crying for hours. Their faces were red, their small bodies straining against the restraints of their carriers. To the right of the cage, Zuria remained bound to a chair, the tape still covering her mouth. Fresh blood had dried on her face. "Kang Biol!" Min called out, his voice echoing through the empty space. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Byul walked forward slowly, hands visible and empty. He counted 15 armed men positioned throughout the warehouse, their weapons trained on him from multiple angles. Min had brought an army to kill one unarmed man. The overkill would have been flattering under different circumstances. Let them go, Byul said, his voice carrying across the distance. This is between us. They're innocent. Innocent? Min laughed. Those children carry your blood. That woman carries your heart. That makes them guilty of the worst crime possible. They made you weak. Then you've already won. You've proven your point. Now release them. Oh, I'll release them, Min agreed pleasantly. After I've made you watch them suffer. After you understand what it feels like to be powerless. After you've begged me to kill you just to make it stop. Min pulled a knife from his belt, sunlight glinting off the blade. He moved towards Surya with deliberate slowness, savoring each step. Should I start with her fingers? Her ears? Perhaps I'll get creative and let you choose which pieces I remove first. Byul's hands clenched into fists. Touch her, and you'll regret it. You're unarmed, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. Exactly what do you think you can do to me? This. Byul moved. Not toward Min, but toward the nearest support column where one of the guards stood. The man raised his weapon, but Byul was already inside his range, using speed and proximity to eliminate the rifle's effectiveness. Byul's elbow connected with the guard's throat, crushing his windpipe. The man dropped, choking, and Byul stripped the rifle from his hands in one fluid motion. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. Byul dove behind the fallen guard, using the body as cover while rounds tore through the air where he'd been standing. He came up firing, dropping 2 guards before their colleagues could adjust aim. The rifle clicked empty after 6 shots. Byul threw it aside and sprinted toward the next column, bullets chasing his shadow. 7 years of martial arts training, 10 years of street fighting, 17 years of surviving impossible situations. All of it crystallized into pure instinct, as Byul became something he'd always been beneath the expensive suits and political maneuvering. A weapon. He reached the second guard before the man could track him properly. Byul's palm strike shattered the guard's nose, driving bone fragments into his brain. The guard collapsed instantly. Byul caught the falling pistol, rolled behind a container, and fired 3 precise shots. 3 more guards dropped. Min's voice cut through the chaos, high-pitched with fury. Kill him, all of you! Kill him now! The remaining guards converged from multiple angles, their crossfire turning the warehouse into a killing field. Byul moved between cover points with calculated desperation, each movement bringing him closer to the cage, closer to Surya, closer to his children. A bullet grazed his shoulder, burning through flesh and muscle. Byul ignored the pain, firing twice more. 1 guard fell screaming, clutching his leg. Another dropped silently, a perfect headshot. 4 guards left, plus Min. Byul's pistol clicked empty. He threw it at the nearest guard, striking the man's face, then charged forward with nothing but momentum and rage. They collided like cars crashing, tumbling across concrete. Byul's fist connected with the guard's jaw once, twice, 3 times until the man went limp. 3 guards remaining. They advanced together, coordinating their approach. Professional, disciplined, trained to handle situations exactly like this. Byul picked up a length of pipe from the floor and swung it like a sword, forcing them back momentarily. Behind them, Min had reached Surya's chair. The knife gleamed in his hand, pressed against her throat. Enough! Min shouted. Drop your weapon or I open her veins right now! Byul froze. The pipe fell from his hands, clattering against concrete. That's better, Min said. Now get on your knees. Byul complied slowly, never taking his eyes off Surya's face. Terror dominated her expression, but beneath it he saw something else. Recognition, understanding, maybe even forgiveness. I'm sorry, Byul said to her. For everything. Min moved the knife away from Surya's throat, turning toward Byul with triumph carved into his features. How touching. Last words for the woman you destroyed. How very noble. He raised a pistol Bjol hadn't seen him draw. The shot came from behind Bjol, fired by one of the 3 remaining guards. But Min's aim wasn't directed at Bjol. It was directed at Zuriya. Punishment for making Bjol weak. Revenge delivered through the thing he loved most. Bjol moved without thinking, throwing himself sideways. The bullet meant for Zuriya's heart struck him instead, punching through his chest 2 inches left of center. The impact spun him completely around, blood blooming across his shirt like a dark flower. He hit the ground hard, gasping. The world narrowed to a pinpoint of light surrounded by darkness. Pain radiated from Bjol's chest in waves that threatened to drag him under. He could taste copper in his mouth, feel warmth spreading beneath him as blood pooled on the concrete. Through the haze, he heard Zuriya's muffled screams behind the tape, heard his children crying in their cage, heard Chairman Min's laughter echoing through the warehouse. "How beautiful," Min said, walking closer. "The great Kong Bjol, bleeding out on the floor like any common criminal. I wanted you broken, but this is better. This is poetry." Bjol's vision swam. His fingers scraped against concrete, searching for anything he could use. His hand closed around something cold and metallic, the pistol from the guard he'd killed earlier, hidden beneath his body. Min stood 3 feet away now, savoring his victory. "Don't worry. I'll make sure your children remember this moment. I'll tell them how their father died begging for mercy." "Never," Bjol rasped, bringing the pistol up in one final desperate motion. He fired 3 times. The first shot took Min in the stomach, the second in the chest, the third in the throat. Chairman Min's eyes went wide with shock. He touched his neck, fingers coming away red. His mouth worked soundlessly, trying to form words that would never come. He collapsed backward, blood spreading around him in an ever-widening pool. The 3 remaining guards rushed forward, but they never reached Bjol. The warehouse doors exploded inward. Kalen led the charge with 40 operatives behind him, flooding the space with overwhelming force. The guards surrendered instantly, dropping weapons and raising hands. The fight was over in 11 seconds. Kalen reached Bjol first, dropping to his knees beside him. "Boss, stay with me. Medic! I need a medic now!" "The cage," Bjol managed, each word agony. "Get them out! Get them safe!" "Already done. They're safe. Everyone's safe." Kalen pressed hands against the wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "But you need to stay conscious, you hear me? Don't you dare die after pulling that hero nonsense." Bjol's vision faded to gray, then to black. He woke 4 days later in a private hospital room, tubes running from his arms and machines beeping steadily beside him. The bullet had missed his heart by 2 centimeters. He'd lost enough blood to kill most men twice, but Bjol had survived worse odds, and apparently, he wasn't done surviving yet. Zuriya sat in a chair beside his bed, both twins sleeping in her arms. She looked exhausted, haunted, but whole, alive. "Hey," Bjol whispered, his voice rough from the breathing tube they'd only recently removed. Zuriya's head snapped up. For 3 long seconds, she just stared at him. Then tears spilled down her cheeks. "You absolute idiot! You jumped in front of a bullet. It was meant for you." "I know, I saw." She wiped her eyes with one hand, careful not to disturb the babies. "Kalen explained everything. How you came alone. How you fought 15 armed men. How you killed Chairman Min before you passed out. Is everyone safe?" "Everyone's safe. Your people have been guarding us around the clock. The doctor says you'll recover fully, but it'll take months." Zuriya's voice cracked. "You could have died, Bjol. You almost did die." "I know. Then why? Why would you do something so reckless?" "Because they're my children," Bjol said simply. "Because you're the mother of my children. Because I failed you once, and I couldn't fail you again." Zuriya looked down at the twins, both sleeping peacefully despite the chaos their young lives had already witnessed. Verdia stopped breathing in the cage, just for a few seconds, but it felt like forever. I couldn't reach her, couldn't help her, could only watch and pray. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. Zuria met his eyes, her expression complex. You took a bullet for me. You fought an army to save us. You proved that you meant every promise you made. That's not something words can fix or ruin. Does that mean you forgive me? It means I'm willing to try. She adjusted Verdia in her arms, the baby making small sounds in her sleep. Not today, maybe not next month, but someday I might forgive you if you keep showing up. If you prove this wasn't just guilt and adrenaline, I'll show up, Biel promised, every day for the rest of my life. 5 months later, on a warm April afternoon, Biel pushed a double stroller through a private garden behind a house in Busan, far from Seoul, far from the empire he'd spent 17 years building, far from the violence that had defined his entire adult life. He'd sold everything, the clubs, the businesses, the connections that had made him one of Seoul's most feared figures. Kaylin had taken over the legitimate operations, transforming them into proper enterprises that existed in daylight rather than shadow. The illegal elements had been absorbed by rivals or dismantled entirely. Kang Byul, the ghost of Seoul's underworld, had simply vanished. In his place stood a father watching his children discover grass for the first time. Verdia grabbed fistfuls of green blades, laughing with delight. Amir observed everything with serious concentration. Those dark eyes taking in every detail. They'd grown so much in 5 months, become so strong, so healthy. Zuria emerged from the house carrying a blanket and a basket of snacks. She'd cut her hair shorter, started smiling more. The shadows beneath her eyes had faded. She looked like the woman Biol had met 24 months ago, before he'd broken everything. They're going to eat the grass, she warned, spreading the blanket near a cherry tree in full bloom. Let them. First-time experiences are important. Zuria laughed, the sound genuine and light. She still hadn't said she loved him. Still kept a careful distance when they were alone. But she let him help with midnight feedings, let him change diapers and sing terrible lullabies, let him be present in ways that mattered more than words. Biol lifted both twins from the stroller, settling them on the blanket. They immediately crawled in opposite directions, forcing him and Zuria to form a defensive perimeter. The simple domesticity of it all felt surreal, impossible, perfect. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Cherry blossoms drifted on the wind like snow. Verdia discovered her toes. Amir discovered that pulling grass made satisfying, ripping sounds. Zuria sat beside Biol, not quite touching, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. "This is good," she said quietly. "This life, it's good. It is. The kids are happy, safe. They are." She turned to look at him, her expression thoughtful. "You gave up everything for this. Your power, your reputation, your entire identity. Do you regret it?" Biol watched his children play in the fading light, their laughter mixing with birdsong and the rustle of cherry blossoms. He'd spent 17 years building an empire. It had taken 5 months to learn that empire was meaningless compared to this. Not for a second. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.